Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. The title of my remarks today is The Stampede of the Invisible Elephants. So, how to make visible the invisible, transparent the opaque, in a country where ignorance is a calculated political strategy. This is a major challenge of our times. It's not that people just don't want to see what's going on. What's going on is often kept purposefully from us. But the invisible elephants in the room are getting restless. They're stamping their feet, tossing their trunks in the air, hoping we'll wake up and see them. Take climate change. Believe it or not, opinion polls show that as late as 1998, a large majority of Americans viewed global warming as a real problem that required government action. But over that same decade, a combination of big coal and oil corporations and free market conservative think tanks joined together to deny the reality of climate change. Together, they funded a small group of scientists, former cold warriors from the military-industrial complex, to attack bona fide climate science. These same hired guns previously worked for the tobacco industry to deny the health risks of smoking. They did their magic act, and poof, climate change disappeared, or rather was forced off the national agenda. Now we have the Koch brothers and the Supreme Court trying to keep it off. Elections, they believe, and policymaking should go to the highest bidder. We live with a disastrous legacy of climate inaction now. Not only do we urgently need to acknowledge the invisible element of climate change, but we need to make it visible to others in ways that put social, environmental, and reproductive justice at the center of climate policy. That means building a powerful movement to take on the fossil fuel industry, advocating for safe, non-nuclear forms of renewable energy, exposing the corrupt underbelly of carbon trading schemes and the commodification of nature, finding the overlapping spaces where our movements converge, such as shutting down the oil refinery or coal-fired utility that spews carbon dioxide into the atmosphere at the same time that it poisons the air of surrounding communities of color. And it means challenging the military-industrial complex. The Pentagon is spinning itself as sustainable at the same time that it's the most profligate user of fossil fuels in the entire world and engages in deadly violence against people and the planet. Sometimes when one sees invisible elephants, the urge is to run away to safer pastures before the stampede. We are helped along in this impulse by a culture that serves up a limited menu for the future. Dystopia on the one hand, an ugly world of Hunger Games, and on the other, the utopias of techno-overconsumption, or its opposite, a retreat back to the simple life, which of course was never simple, where we can ride out the twin storms of climate change and the collapse of capitalism through a Puritan ethic of self-sufficiency. All of these, in the end, are too simple, too white, too centered on the self, too characteristically American with a capital A. There are other better futures to be imagined and achieved, but to set our imaginations free requires a new radical worldliness. I'm not talking about global chic here, nor the missionary impulse to save the entire planet, but a worldliness that directs our gaze outward so we can connect with and learn from the struggles and movements of people in other countries. Acknowledge that the identities we choose for ourselves or that are forced upon us do not necessarily translate into the same language and the same politics everywhere. There is liberation in radical worldliness, new ideas, new solidarities, new possibilities, and new ways to see and deal with those invisible elephants in the room. Now, to conclude, I'd just like to give a shout out to the sung and unsung courageous whistleblowers, writers, artists, and activists who make the invisible elephants visible to us, often at great personal cost. To Chelsea Manning behind bars for leaking the real story of the U.S. wars on Iraq and Afghanistan. To Edward Snowden, exiled in Russia. To female prisoners in California who exposed coercive sterilization. To male prisoners in the same state who went on a hunger strike to expose inhuman conditions. To the hunger strikers at immigrant detention centers in Texas and Washington state. To the indigenous peoples on the front lines of climate change and protests of the Keystone XL pipeline. To trust Black women for speaking truth to the powers behind the anti-abortion Black genocide billboards. And to all of us here, each and every one of us, standing firm and standing true for justice. Thank you.